The sky was a heavy blanket of gray that afternoon, pressing down on the city like a thick wool coat. It was one of those strange days where the air felt wet and cold, but the ground stayed completely dry. There was no rain falling, not a single drop. Yet the whole world seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for a storm that refused to break. The air smelled of ozone and old concrete, sharp and clean, filling the lungs with a chill that made you want to shiver. In the middle of a busy park, away from the crowded sidewalks and the noise of the traffic, there was a simple metal bench. It was painted a dark green color that was chipping away in places, revealing the rusted metal underneath. This was where Keanu decided to sit. He didn't choose this spot because it was comfortable or because it offered a great view. He chose it because it was empty, and for a moment, he wanted to feel like he was just another part of the landscape, unnoticed and still. He walked slowly toward the bench, his hands buried deep in the pockets of a well-worn leather jacket. The jacket had seen better days. It was creased and soft, molded to his body by years of wear. He wasn't wearing his sunglasses, which was rare for him. His dark hair was messy, stirred by the wind, and his face looked incredibly tired. Not the kind of tired you feel after a bad night of sleep, but a deep, bone-deep weariness that comes from carrying heavy things in your heart for a very long time. When he sat down, he let out a long, slow breath. It turned into a small white cloud in the cold air and then vanished. He slumped forward, resting his elbows on his knees, and looked down at the dirt and dry leaves near his feet. Around him, the city kept moving. People rushed past with coffee cups in their hands, their eyes glued to their phone screens. Dogs barked in the distance, and the sound of sirens wailed somewhere far away, a lonely sound that echoed off the tall buildings. But Keanu sat perfectly still, like a statue in a museum that everyone walks past without really seeing. To anyone walking by, he might have looked like just another man taking a break. He wasn't wearing a suit or flashy clothes. His boots were scuffed, and his t-shirt underneath the jacket was plain black. If you didn't know who he was, you wouldn't look twice. You would just see a guy in his 50s sitting alone, looking a bit sad. But if you stopped for a second and really looked at him, you would see the heaviness in his shoulders. You would see the way his jaw was set tight, as if he was fighting to keep everything inside. It is strange to think about how the world sees him compared to how he sees himself. On movie screens, he is a hero. He is a guy who jumps off buildings, who fights armies of bad guys, who saves the world with a gun in each hand. People see him as John Wick, as Neo, as a man of action and strength. They see the fame, the money, and the red carpets. They think that because someone is famous, their life must be perfect. They think that money can buy a cure for sadness, and that success can fill the empty spaces in a home. But sitting there on that cold, hard bench, none of that mattered. The movie tickets sold, the awards on the shelves, the millions of fans, it all felt very far away. In this quiet corner of the park, under a sky that looked like it might cry at any moment, he was just a human being. And being a human being is hard sometimes. It is hard even when you have everything, because grief and loneliness do not care how much money you have in the bank. They do not care if your face is on a billboard. Keanu closed his eyes for a moment and listened to the wind. It whistled through the bare branches of the trees above him, making a scratching sound. In the darkness behind his eyelids, memories floated by. He thought about the people he had loved and lost. He thought about the quiet of an empty house. He thought about how loud the world can be, and how much silence he sometimes craved. It was a silence that wasn't empty, but full of the voices of the past. He remembered how people used to tell him, "It gets easier. Time heals all wounds." He knew they meant well. He knew they were trying to be kind. But sitting there, feeling the cold air bite at his nose, he knew that wasn't entirely true. Time doesn't heal everything. It just teaches you how to carry the weight. You learn how to walk with the stone in your chest so that you don't stumble. You learn to smile for the cameras and sign the autographs, even when your heart feels like it's breaking. A dry leaf skittered across the pavement, blown by the wind, and came to rest against the toe of his boot. He stared at it. It was brown and brittle, dead but still beautiful in its own way. He felt a strange connection to that leaf, just drifting along where the world pushed it. He shifted his weight on the bench. The metal was cold, even through his jeans. He wrapped his arms tighter around himself, trying to generate some heat. He felt very small in that moment. Not small in a bad way, but small in a way that reminds you that you are just a tiny speck in a huge universe. The problems that seem so big in the movies, the stunts, the scripts, the deadlines, they were nothing compared to the reality of life and death. The reality is sitting alone on a gray afternoon and missing someone you can never talk to again. He looked up at the sky again. The clouds were moving fast, dragged along by a high wind. He couldn't feel down on the ground. It was a dramatic sky, the kind painters love, full of shadows and light fighting each other. It felt like the sky was mirroring exactly what was happening inside him. There was a storm brewing up there, full of thunder and lightning, but it was trapped. It couldn't come out. It just stayed there, brewing and rumbling in the silence. A young couple walked past a bench, holding hands. They were laughing about something, their heads close together. They didn't notice the man sitting just a few feet away. To them, he was just part of the background, like a lamppost or a trash can. Keanu watched them out of the corner of his eye. He didn't feel jealous, and he didn't feel angry. He just felt a distant kind of fondness. He was happy that they could laugh like that. He hoped they would hold on to that happiness for a long time, because he knew how fragile it was. He knew how quickly the laughter can stop and the silence can take over. He sighed again, a ragged sound that caught in his throat. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple sandwich wrapped in plastic. He had bought it at a small deli a few blocks away, mostly because he wanted to support the owner. But he hadn't taken a bite yet. He wasn't hungry. The idea of eating felt like too much work. It required energy he didn't have. He just held the sandwich in his hand, turning it over, feeling the softness of the bread through the wrapper. "Are you okay?" a voice asked suddenly. Keanu flinched slightly. He hadn't heard anyone walk up. He was so used to people ignoring him or shouting his name from across the street that a quiet, concerned voice caught him off guard. He lifted his head slowly. Standing a few feet away was an older man. He was wearing a coat that was too thin for the weather and a scarf that was unraveling at the edges. His face was lined with deep wrinkles, and his eyes were a pale, watery blue. He wasn't holding a phone. He wasn't holding a camera. He was just holding his own hands together, rubbing them to keep warm. Keanu looked at him, really looked at him. He saw the dirt under man's fingernails and the redness on his cheeks from the cold. He saw a man who had also seen hard times. A man who also knew what it felt like to be alone in a crowd. For a second, Keanu thought about giving a fake answer. He thought about saying, "Yeah, I'm fine, just waiting for a ride." That was the celebrity answer. The answer that keeps people at a distance. The answer that protects you. He had used it 1,000 times. It was a shield. But looking into the stranger's eyes, the shield felt too heavy to hold up. The old man wasn't asking for a photo. He wasn't asking for money. He was just asking a human question. He saw the sadness, and he didn't look away. Keanu put the sandwich back in his pocket. He sat up a little straighter, trying to shake off the gloom. But he couldn't quite do it. He managed a small, tired smile. It was a genuine smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Just thinking," Keanu said quietly. His voice was rough, low, and soft. "It's just a heavy day." The old man nodded slowly. He didn't say, "Who are you?" or "Aren't you that guy?" He just understood. We all have heavy days. Some days are heavier than others. "Heavy days are the worst," the old man said. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other. The air gets so thick you can hardly breathe. Makes you want to sit down and never stand up again. Keanu looked at the empty space on the bench next to him. It was a small bench, but there was room. He looked back at the old man, who was shivering slightly in the wind. There was no gate between them, no fence, no barrier. Just two people in a park on a gray afternoon. "Yeah," Keanu said, his voice dropping even lower, almost to a whisper. "It does." The wind picked up, swirling a cloud of dust around the bench. But still, the sky refused to let the rain fall. The world felt suspended in time. Keanu looked at the ground again, then back at the stranger. He felt a strange pull, a connection that seemed to say that he wasn't supposed to be alone right now. That maybe, just maybe, this interaction was the reason he had stopped walking and sat down in the first place. He moved his hand slightly, a tiny gesture, and patted the cold metal of the bench beside him. It was a simple movement, but it said everything. It said, asterisk, you don't have to stand there in the cold. You don't have to be alone either. Asterisk. The old man's eyes widened a little bit, surprised by the invitation. He looked at the bench, then at the famous actor, then back at the bench. He saw not a movie star, but a man who looked just as lost as he felt. Thank you, the old man said softly. He took a step forward, the crunch of his shoes on the gravel, the only sound in the quiet air. Keanu didn't say anything. He just watched as the man sat down. They sat shoulder to shoulder, two strangers sharing a bench on a day that felt like a storm without the rain. And for the first time all afternoon, the weight in Keanu's chest felt just a little bit lighter, as if the simple act of sharing the space had lifted a corner of the heavy gray sky. The metal bench gave a quiet groan as the stranger lowered himself onto the space beside Keanu. It was a rusty, tired sound that seemed to fit the mood of the afternoon perfectly. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. They just sat there, two small figures against a backdrop of a city that refused to slow down. The air was getting colder as the afternoon wore on, a sharp, biting chill that seeped right through clothing and settled deep in the bones. It was the kind of cold that makes your fingers feel stiff and your nose run. Keanu kept his hands in his pockets, his left hand still clutching the uneaten sandwich he had bought earlier. He glanced sideways at the man who had joined him. Up close, the stranger looked even older. His skin was like crumpled paper, etched with lines that told stories of hard life. His coat was thin, a cheap synthetic fabric that offered no real protection against the wind, and his shoes were held together by tape. There was a smell about him, cigarette smoke, damp wool, and the scent of soap that was struggling to cover up the street. The man was staring straight ahead, his eyes following a pigeon that was pecking a crumb on the pavement. He didn't look at Keanu. He didn't ask for an autograph. He didn't pull out a phone to take a picture. He just sat there, as if he had every right to be in that spot. It was strange for Keanu. He was so used to being looked at, being analyzed, being treated like something special that needed to be observed or captured. But this man treated him like he was invisible, and in that invisibility, Keanu found a strange kind of peace. A few yards away, sitting at a small round table outside a coffee shop, a young woman watched them. She had a laptop open in front of her, but she wasn't working. She had recognized Keanu immediately when he walked past 20 minutes ago. Her heart had jumped in her chest, the way it does for anyone who sees celebrity in the wild. Her hand had instinctively gone to her phone, ready to snap a picture or record a video. But then she had stopped. She saw the way he sat. She saw the slump of his shoulders and the utter lack of energy in his posture. She saw that he wasn't there to be seen. He was there to disappear. So she waited. She watched with curiosity that turned into something else as the old man approached. She saw the interaction, the invitation to sit, and now she watched them sitting in silence. There was something magnetic about it. It didn't look like a movie scene. It looked like real life. It looked like two souls who were tired of the noise, finding a quiet harbor together. She felt a strange urge to keep watching, not to gossip, but to witness a moment of kindness that felt rare in a world that always seemed to be in a hurry. She picked up her phone, turned the volume off, and held it low against her leg, pressing record just in case something happened. She didn't know why, but she felt like she was supposed to capture this. Back on the bench, the old man cleared his throat. It was a wet, rattling sound. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a pair of knit gloves. They were old and had holes in the fingers, but he put them on slowly, methodically, as if getting dressed for a job. Nasty day, the man said, his voice sounding like gravel crunching. He didn't look at Keanu when he spoke. He just said it to the air in front of him. Keanu nodded slowly. Yeah, he agreed. It feels like the sky is holding its breath. The man chuckled softly. It was a dry sound. That's a good way to put it. Holding its breath. Waiting for something to happen. I've been waiting a long time myself. Keanu turned his head a little more. Waiting for what? The man shrugged, the movement lifting his thin shoulders. A break. A warm room. A sign that things are going to get better. You know how it is. Some days you wake up and you just know the fight is going to be harder than usual. I know that feeling, Keanu said softly. He thought about the years he had spent carrying grief, the way he had learned to function even when his heart felt broken. He thought about the nights he spent alone in a big, empty house. The fight, it gets heavy. Exactly, the man said, turning his head finally. His eyes were sharp, intelligent, and filled with a deep, sad kindness. Heavy, that's the word. It's heavy lifting living, especially when you're doing it alone. Keanu chewed thoughtfully, looking out at the empty park path. A young mother was pushing a stroller in the distance, hurrying toward the warmth of her home. I think people are scared of things that look damaged, Keanu said quietly. They think the damage might catch. They don't realize that the damage is just evidence of living. The old man stopped rubbing his hands and looked at Keanu. A slow smile spread across his face, revealing a few missing teeth. That is a deep thought for a guy eating a sandwich on a bench, he said. But you're right. We're all a little bruised, aren't we? Some of us just hide it better under expensive coats. Keanu looked down at his own leather jacket. It was expensive, yes, but it was scratched and scuffed. He had worn it for years. It had traveled with him to movie sets and on lonely trips across the ocean. It held memories. This coat has seen some things, Keanu admitted. It's been through a few storms. Like me, we're all traveling through the storm, the man said. He leaned his head back, closed his eyes for a moment as the wind ruffled his thin gray hair. I used to think the storm was something that happened to you, like rain or snow, something you had to wait out. But now I think the storm is inside. We carry it with us. The clouds are up here, he pointed to his head, and here, he pointed to his chest. Keanu nodded. He felt a lump in his throat again, tighter this time. He had spent years trying to outrun his own internal weather. He had run to movie sets, to motorcycle rides, to the top of mountains, trying to find a place where the sun would always shine. But no matter how fast he rode or how high he climbed, the gray clouds followed him. Sitting here, listening to a stranger who had so little material wealth but so much wisdom, he felt like he was finally learning how to stand still in the rain without getting wet. I lost someone, Keanu said, the words coming out before he could stop them. He didn't say who. He didn't need to. On this bench, titles didn't matter. A long time ago. And it feels like the storm never really stopped. The old man opened his eyes and turned to him. There was no pity in his gaze, only understanding. He didn't offer empty platitudes like, time heals or she's in a better place. He just sat with the truth. I lost my wife, the man said softly, 20 years ago, and then my son got sick and moved away. I haven't seen him in 10 years. Every morning, I wake up and for a split second, everything is fine. And then I remember, the clouds roll back in. Keanu looked at the man with renewed respect. Here was a man who had lost the very things that anchor a person to the world, a partner, a child, a home. And yet, here he was, sharing his apple and his wisdom with a stranger. How do you keep going? Keanu asked, how do you get out of bed? The man chuckled, a low, rattling sound. Because the sun comes up, because the coffee is hot, because sometimes on a day like today, you sit next to someone who needs an apple more than you do. He nudged Keanu's arm with his elbow. It was a friendly, casual gesture. We keep going for the small things, my friend. The big things, love, fame, fortune, they can break, they can vanish. But the taste of an apple? That's real. The feeling of the sun on your face? That's real. You hold on to the small things to build a new life. Keanu took another bite of the apple. It tasted sweeter now. He realized that for years he had been chasing the big things. He had been looking for a grand meaning to his suffering, a reason why it happened. But maybe there wasn't a grand reason. Maybe there was just the next breath, the next bite, the next kindness. Nearby, the young woman with the phone shifted in her chair. She had been recording for a long time. Her arm was getting tired, but she couldn't put the phone down. She watched the screen, captivated by the body language of the two men. She saw Keanu lean in to hear the old man better. She saw the old man laugh and throw his head back. She saw the way Keanu's shoulders would have been hunched in defeat when he first sat down, were now relaxed. She had come here to work on her laptop, to finish a report for a job she didn't really like. Now, her screen was dark, and her phone was her only focus. She was watching a masterclass in humanity. She knew that if she posted this, It would go viral. She knew that the headline would be something sensational. Keanu Reeves eats with homeless man. But watching it live, she knew that headline would be a lie. It wasn't about a movie star helping a poor person. It was about two equals helping each other survive the afternoon. She zoomed in slightly on Keanu's face as he listened to the old man speak. There's a look of awe there. He wasn't the teacher. He was the student. He was absorbing every word like a dry sponge absorbs water. It was humbling to see. It made her think about her own life, about the time she had walked past people who looked like they were struggling, afraid to make eye contact. She felt a pang of guilt, but also a spark of hope. If a man who had everything could sit and learn from a man who had nothing, maybe there was hope for the rest of them. Back on the bench, the conversation had shifted to lighter things. The old man was pointing out the different types of birds that were brave enough to stay in the city for the winter. "See that one?" he whispered, pointing a gloved finger at a small, brown sparrow pecking at the ground. "That's a fighter. He's got no fat on him, but he's out there looking for crumbs. I like that little guy. He doesn't know he's small." Keanu watched the bird. "I think he knows he's small," Keanu said. "I think he just doesn't care." "Exactly." The old man slapped his knee. "Exactly. Size doesn't matter. Heart matters. That bird has heart." Keanu finished the apple. Holding on to the small core, he looked around for a trash can but didn't see one nearby. He instinctively moved to put it in his pocket, but the old man stopped him. "Give it here," the man said, holding out his hand. Keanu placed the core in his palm. The old man tossed it gently under a nearby bush. "The ants need to eat too," he said simply. "Nothing goes to waste. Not in nature." Keanu watched the core land in the dirt. It was such a simple act, such a small gesture of respect for the world. He thought about the film sets he had been on, where trays of expensive food were thrown away after sitting out for an hour. He thought about the waste in his own life, not just of food, but of time and emotion. He spent so much time worrying about the past or the future that he wasted the precious moments of the present. "You're a very wise man," Keanu said, turning to look at his benchmate. "I'm just an old guy who sits on benches," the man replied, waving the compliment away. "You see a lot when you sit still. Most people are running so fast they miss the show. They miss the birds. They miss the clouds. They miss each other." Keanu took a deep breath of the cold air. It still smelled of the city of exhaust and concrete, but there was a freshness to it now. He felt a sense of calm that he hadn't felt in months. The internal storm was still there, raging in the distance, but he was no longer standing in the middle of it getting soaked. He was watching it from a shelter, and the shelter was this bench, this moment, this friendship forged in the space of an hour. They sat in silence again, but it wasn't an awkward silence anymore. It was a companionable silence. They were two veterans of a war that no one else could see, sharing a moment of truce on a cold metal bench. The wind picked up again, sending a swirl of dust and dry leaves dancing around their feet. Keanu shivered slightly. He was hungry, but the sandwich in his pocket felt like a brick. He didn't want to eat it. Eating felt like admitting he was alive and functioning, and he wasn't sure he was ready to do that yet. The old man noticed the shiver. He looked at Keanu's jacket, a high-quality, thick leather jacket that probably cost more than the man made in a year. Then he looked down at his own thin coat. He frowned a little. He shifted his weight and reached into the inside pocket of his coat. He fumbled around for a second and pulled out a small, bruised red apple and a sandwich wrapped in clear plastic. The bread was squished flat. "You eat yet?" the man asked. Keanu looked at the food. It looked humble. It looked real. "I bought something earlier," Keanu said, patting his pocket. "I just haven't felt like eating it." The man looked at Keanu's pocket, then back at his face. He seemed to look right through the famous features, past the actor, and saw the human being underneath. He saw a man who was hurting, a man who was maybe just as hungry as he was, but in a different way. "Sometimes you gotta eat, even if you don't want to," the man said. "Keeps the strength up. You can't fight the heavy days on an empty tank." Keanu looked at the man's offering. It was clearly the man's own meal, probably his only meal for the day. And yet, he was offering it. He wasn't offering it to a celebrity. He was offering it to a guy sitting on a bench who looked like he needed a friend. I can't take your food, Keanu said gently. That's yours. I got plenty, the man lied. He pushed the apple and the squished sandwich toward Keanu. Take it. I insist. An apple a day, right? That's what they say. And this sandwich, it's just a bit of ham and cheese. Nothing fancy, but it does the job. Keanu stared at the food. He felt a lump forming in his throat. It was such a small thing. A bruised apple. A squished sandwich. In the world of movies, he had eaten in five-star restaurants. He had eaten catering on sets that cost thousands of dollars. But no meal had ever been presented to him with this much purer, unfiltered generosity. This man had very little, and he was willing to share half of it with a stranger just because he looked sad. You're a good man, Keanu whispered. We're all just trying to get by, the man replied, waving his hand dismissively. Go on, take it. It'll make me feel better. I hate eating alone anyway. Keanu slowly reached out and took the apple and sandwich. His hand trembled just a little. The apple was cold and hard against his palm. It felt grounding. It felt real. Thank you, Keanu said. He meant it with every fiber of his being. Don't mention it, the man said. He leaned back against the bench, stretching his legs out in front of him. I ate a big breakfast. Late breakfast. I'm still full. It was an obvious lie, but Keanu didn't call him on it. He just accepted the kindness. He unwrapped the plastic from the sandwich. The smell of processed cheese and cheap ham filled his nose. It wasn't a gourmet smell, but it smelled like comfort. It smelled like survival. Keanu took a bite. He chewed slowly. It tasted like ordinary bread and salty meat. But as he swallowed, he felt a warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with the food. It was the warmth of being seen. It was the warmth of connection. For a moment, the heavy gray sky didn't feel so oppressive. The wind didn't feel so cold. The young woman at the coffee shop table watched through the screen of her phone. She zoomed in slightly, capturing the way Keanu took the sandwich from the rough hand of the stranger. She saw the look on Keanu's face. Not the look of an actor pretending to be grateful, but the look of a broken man being put back together, one small piece at a time. She bit her lip, her eyes stinging with sudden tears. She knew she was watching something special. She knew she was watching the opposite of what the internet usually showed. It wasn't a scandal. It wasn't a meme. It was a quiet miracle. You know, the old man said, breaking the silence again as Keanu took another bite. I used to have a dog. A long time ago. He used to sit with me like this. We just watched the world go by. Best listener I ever had. Keanu smiled, a small, crooked smile that actually reached his eyes this time. Dogs are good like that. They don't ask for anything. They're just happy to be there. Yeah, the man said, staring off into the distance with a nostalgic look. Miss that dog. But you meet good people sometimes, too. People who sit with you. Keanu finished the sandwich in a few more bites, crumpling the plastic wrapper in his hand. He held on to the apple, rubbing his thumb over the bruised skin. He felt different than he had 20 minutes ago. The sadness was still there, of course. It didn't just vanish. But the loneliness had receded. He wasn't an island anymore. He was connected to this person, this stranger who had shared his bread. I'm glad you sat down, Keanu said honestly. Me too, the man replied. He rubbed his hands together, the gloves with the holes in the fingers rubbing against each other. Me too. The ground is hard, but the company is good. They sat there for a while longer, ignoring the cold, ignoring the busy city rushing past them. The sky was getting darker, the clouds turning a deeper shade of charcoal as the evening approached. The streetlights flickered on, casting long, artificial shadows across the park. The people walking by were rushing home, eager to get out of the cold. But on that bench, time seemed to stand still. There was no rush. There was just the sound of breathing, the rustle of leaves, and the quiet understanding between two men who knew that life was hard, but that kindness made it bearable. The rain that had been threatening to fall in Keanu's heart was held back by the simple, solid roof of human compassion. The light was beginning to fade from the sky, turning the heavy gray clouds into a deep, bruised purple. The streetlights along the park path flickered to life, casting long, yellow stretches across the ground. The artificial light hummed softly, competing with the distant rumble of traffic. It was getting colder, the kind of damp cold that sticks to your clothes and makes you feel older than you are. On the metal bench, however, the air between the two men felt strangely warm, protected by the invisible bubble of their conversation. Keanu turned the bruised red apple over in his hands. It was small, imperfect, and undoubtedly the cheapest item in the bin of the grocery store, but to him, it felt precious. He took a bite. The sound was crisp and loud in the quiet space between them. The apple was tart and a little soft, but it tasted like life. It tasted like the earth and like the work of human hands. "It's a good apple," Keanu said, his mouth full. He wiped a crumb from his lip with the back of his hand. "They usually are," the older man replied. He was rubbing his hands together again, trying to generate friction. His movements were slow and rhythmic, even the ugly ones. People walk right past the ones with the spots. They want the shiny ones. But the spotted ones, they have just as much flavor, sometimes more. "I needed this," Keanu admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I really needed to sit here today. I think I was waiting for you." The old man looked at him, his pale blue eyes crinkling at the corners. "Maybe I was waiting for you, too," he said. "The universe has a way of putting people where they need to be, even if they don't know it at the time." The wind picked up again, stronger this time, sending a chill through Keanu that he couldn't block out with his jacket. He noticed the old man shivering violently. The man's coat was thin, and his gloves were full of holes. It was getting too cold to just sit there. The moment was passing, as all moments do. Reality was creeping back in. Keanu realized he couldn't just say goodbye and walk away to his warm hotel room. He couldn't take this connection and this wisdom and leave the man shivering on the bench. The lesson the old man had taught him was about kindness, about the small things. If he walked away now, he would be forgetting the lesson before he even stood up. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out his wallet. It was a simple leather wallet, battered and worn. He opened it and took out all the cash he had. He didn't count it. He didn't look at the bills. He just folded them together. But then he paused. He looked at the money in his hand, and then he looked at the man. Offering money felt transactional. It felt like paying for a service. But this wasn't service. This was a moment of grace. If he just handed over the money, he might insult him. He might turn this human connection back into a rich man helping poor man scenario, which was exactly what the old man had avoided by treating him as an equal. Keanu put the wallet back in his pocket, but kept the cash in his hand. He needed to do this differently. He needed to do it in a way that honored the friendship they had built in the last hour. "It's getting too cold out here," Keanu said, his voice firm but gentle. "The storm is coming. We can't stay on this bench forever." "No," the man agreed, his teeth chattering slightly. "We can't. My bones are telling me it's time to move." "I have to go," Keanu said. "I have a thing I have to get to." He didn't want to say movie set or meeting. Those words belonged to a different world. "But before I go, I want you to take this." He held out the folded bills. The old man looked at the money, then up at Keanu. His face didn't light up with greed. His expression didn't change much at all. He looked hesitant. "I don't do this for money," he said, his voice stiffening slightly. "I gave you the apple because you look like you needed it. I'm not a beggar." "I know you're not," Keanu said quickly, leaning forward. "I know that. Please, take it not as charity, but as a gift between friends. You bought me dinner. Let me buy you a warm bed tonight, and a hot meal, a real one. Please." He held the money out closer, not withdrawing his hand. The old man looked at the cash. It was enough for a hotel room for a few nights, enough for hot food and clean clothes. He looked at Keanu's eyes and saw the sincerity there. He saw that Keanu needed to give this as much as the man needed to receive it. It was a circle. It had to be completed. "Okay," the man said softly. He reached out and took the money. His rough, cold fingers brushed against Keanu's hand. "Thank you. That is very kind." "You're welcome," Keanu said, feeling a weight lift off his chest. "Get somewhere warm. Eat something good." "I will," the man promised. He tucked the money away deep inside his coat, close to his heart. "You take care of yourself, friend. Remember the apple." Remember the small things. I will, Keanu said. I promise. Keanu stood up. His legs were stiff from sitting so long. The cold air rushed in to fill the space where his body had been, breaking the warm bubble. He looked down at the old man one last time. Goodbye, Keanu said. Goodbye, the man replied. He didn't stand up. He settled back onto the bench, ready to watch the world go by for a little while longer, maybe waiting for the next person who needed an apple. Keanu turned and began to walk away. He felt different. The gray sky was still there, but the world seemed to have more color. The streetlights seemed brighter. He took a deep breath, and for the first time in a long time, the air didn't feel like it was choking him. It felt like air, just simple, breathable air. As he walked toward the park exit, he didn't notice the young woman sitting at the table. She had stopped recording. She was sitting with her phone in her lap, staring at the screen, tears streaming down her face. She watched him walk away, his hands in his pockets, his steps a little lighter than before. She looked at the video thumbnail, the image of the two men, one famous, one forgotten, sitting shoulder to shoulder. She knew she had something powerful. She knew she had the truth. But she also knew that she couldn't just post it with a clickbait title. She had to be careful. She had to respect the moment. She tapped the screen gently, as if thanking the two men for what they had given her. Then, with a deep breath, she opened her social media app. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She needed to find the right words. She needed to make sure the world understood what they were seeing. It wasn't a story about a celebrity. It was a story about a broken heart, finding a Band-Aid in the most unlikely place. It was a story about how we are all just walking each other home. She started to type, her heart pounding in her chest, knowing that once she hit upload, the quiet moment on the bench would belong to the world, and the world would never be the same. The young woman sat at the small metal table for a long time after Keanu walked away. Her coffee was cold, a dark pool of liquid in a white paper cup that had long since lost its heat. The park was almost empty now. The wind had chased away the casual walkers, and the sky was a deep, dark ink blue, signaling that night had officially taken over. She wrapped her coat tighter around herself, but she wasn't ready to leave. She felt like she had just witnessed a sacred event, something private and holy, and she needed a moment to process what she was supposed to do with it. She looked down at her phone. The video was paused on the screen, capturing the exact moment Keanu took the sandwich. It was grainy and a little shaky, but the emotion was clear. You could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he held his head. You could see the kindness in the old man's eyes. It wasn't a video of a movie star acting. It was a video of a human being breaking open and being put back together. She unlocked her phone and opened the social media app. Her thumb hovered over the post button, but she stopped. She had thousands of followers, people who followed her for travel tips and fashion photos. If she posted this, it would explode instantly. But that was what scared her. The internet could be a cruel place. It could take a beautiful moment and tear it apart, analyze it, mock it, or turn it into a meme. She didn't want that for the two men on the bench. They deserved better than becoming a trending topic for a few hours and then being forgotten. She started to type a caption. Look who I saw in the park today. No, that sounded too shallow. That made it about the fame. She deleted it. She tried again. Keanu Reeves looking so sad. No, that felt exploitative. It felt like she was using his pain for likes. She took a deep breath and looked at the image one more time. She remembered the feeling in her chest when she watched them share the apple. It wasn't about sadness. It was about connection. She typed slowly, choosing her words with care. Today, I saw two strangers share a bench on a cold afternoon. One of them happened to be a famous actor. But for 20 minutes, they were just two men trying to survive the day. They shared food. They shared stories. They reminded me that we are all carrying heavy things, and sometimes the best thing we can do is sit next to someone and offer an apple. No filters. No script. Just kindness. She read it over. It felt right. It respected the dignity of the moment. She hit share and watched the circle spin as a video uploaded to the digital world. Then she tucked her phone into her pocket, packed her laptop into her bag, and stood up. The metal chair scraped against the pavement, making a loud noise in a quiet park. She took one last look at the empty bench where the two men had sat. It looked just like a normal bench again, cold and empty, but the air still felt different to her. It felt charged. She began to walk toward the subway station, her head down against the wind. She had no idea that the small digital file she had just released was already traveling through wires and servers, landing on screens all over the city. Meanwhile, Keanu was walking through the busy streets. The city was alive with the energy of the evening. People were rushing to restaurants, calling cabs, and laughing as they headed to bars. The noise was loud, a chaotic symphony of honking horns, shouting, and music thumping from passing cars. Usually, this level of noise made Keanu want to retreat into himself. He would pull his hood up, put his head down, and power through until he reached the safety of his home. But tonight was different. The noise didn't bother him. He looked at the people rushing past and didn't feel annoyed. He felt curious. He looked at a young couple arguing near a bus stop and wondered what their storm was. He looked at a businessman checking his watch nervously and wondered if he was running home to someone he loved or running away from an empty house. The old man's words were echoing in his head. We're all just trying to get by. He passed a bakery that was closing down. The smell of fresh bread was still drifting out of the open vent. It made his stomach growl, a reminder that he had only eaten half a sandwich. But he didn't mind the hunger. It felt good. It felt human. He stopped at a street corner, waiting for the light to change. A car drove by with the windows down, blasting a song from a popular radio station. It was a loud, energetic pop song about partying and having a good time. It felt like it was from a different universe than the quiet bench he had just left. He looked at his reflection in the shop window. Behind him, he saw the familiar face, the one that was on posters and billboards. But he looked closer. He saw the same eyes that had looked at the old man with such intensity. He realized that he wasn't acting when he was on that bench. He was more himself in that hour than he had been in years of premieres and interviews. He had let the armor down. He had let someone in. The light changed, and the crowd surged forward. Keanu moved with them, just another drop in the river of people. He felt a sense of lightness, as if he had taken off a heavy backpack he had been wearing for miles. The rain in his heart hadn't stopped completely. The clouds were still there, but he wasn't drowning anymore. He had learned to swim, back in the digital world. Things were moving fast. The video had landed on the feed of a local news blogger who had a knack for spotting emotional content. He saw the thumbnail, the contrast between the movie star and the homeless man, and he felt the hook. He didn't watch it with the same reverence as the young woman who filmed it. To him, it was content. It was a story. He shared on his page with a simple caption. Even the biggest stars have the saddest eyes. Watch this. And then the dam broke. The algorithm, that mysterious machine that decides what the world sees, latched onto the video. It saw the high engagement, the people stopping to watch, the comments being left. It started pushing the video out to more people, not just in the city, but in neighboring states, then across the country. It appeared on the phones of people sitting in dentist offices, on the laptops of students in libraries, and on the tablets of parents trying to put kids to bed. At first, people watched it because they recognized the actor. They paused their scrolling, curious to see what he was doing. Was he fighting? Was he yelling? Was he doing something crazy? But then they got sucked in. They saw the quietness of it. They saw the sandwich. They saw the way Keanu leaned in to listen. And they didn't see a celebrity. They saw themselves. In a living room in a small town in Ohio, a woman who had just lost her husband watched the video on her phone while sitting in her dark kitchen. She saw Keanu's slumped shoulders and recognized her own posture. She watched the old man offer the apple and wept, because she realized that kindness still existed in the world, even when she felt alone. In a college dorm room, a group of friends who were joking around fell silent as the video played on the TV screen. They had connected to a laptop. They stopped laughing when they saw the genuine smile on Keanu's face. It made them think about their own lives, about the pressure to be cool and happy all the time. They saw that it was okay to sit on a bench and be sad. The comment section began to fill up, but it wasn't the usual internet mess of hate and arguments. It was a flood of vulnerability. "This made me cry," one person wrote. I've been sitting alone in my apartment for weeks, and this made me feel like I'm not the only one. God bless that old man. Another comment read, he didn't care who Keanu was. He just saw a human who needed a friend. I've always looked up to him as an actor, someone else posted. But today, I look up to him as a man. We're all just walking each other home. The video started to trend. It climbed the charts, passing funny cat videos and political arguments. It hit the #1 spot in the viral category. Millions of views turned into tens of millions. The young woman who had filmed it was walking down the subway stairs when her phone started to buzz in her pocket. It buzzed once, then twice, then 10 times. She pulled it out and saw the notifications. 500 likes, 1,000 likes, 5,000 likes. Her hands started to shake. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't wanted fame. She had just wanted to share a moment of truth. But the internet was no longer hers to control. The video had taken on a life of its own. It was being shared, retweeted, and reposted on every platform imaginable. News stations were scrambling to find out who the woman was, to interview her. They were trying to find out who the old man was. They wanted to turn this spontaneous moment of grace into a news story. They wanted labels and names and backgrounds. Meanwhile, Keanu had reached his destination. He walked into the lobby of his building, giving a small nod to the security guard behind the desk. He stepped into the elevator and pressed a button for his floor. As the elevator rose smoothly, he leaned his head against the cold metal wall and closed his eyes. He thought about the old man's gloves with the holes in them. He thought about the bruised apple. He felt a profound sense of gratitude. He was grateful that the man had sat down. He was grateful that he hadn't been chased away by a security guard or a fan asking for a selfie. It was the first time in a long time that he had felt truly connected to another person without any barriers. The elevator dinged, and the doors slid open. He walked down the hallway to his door. He unlocked it and stepped inside. The apartment was quiet, just the way he liked it. But tonight, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt peaceful. He took off his jacket and hung it up. He walked to the window and looked out at the city lights below. Millions of people were down there, living their lives, fighting their own storms. He had no idea that down there, in the glow of millions of screens, people were watching him. He had no idea that his quiet moment of pain and healing was breaking the internet. He just stood there, looking at the lights. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel the need to run away from his thoughts. He stood there, and he let himself just be. The rain was still falling in his heart, but he was learning that it was okay to get wet, as long as you had someone to share the shelter with. And even if that person was a stranger on a bench for 20 minutes, it was enough. It was enough to keep him going. The next morning, the sun still refused to come out. The sky remained a stubborn, heavy gray, hanging low over the city like a lid that wouldn't quite close. But inside the pockets of millions of people around the world, things were lighting up. The video had traveled to the night while the city slept, crossing oceans and time zones, landing on screens in countries Keanu had never even visited. The headlines were everywhere. Every news site, every entertainment blog, every social media feed had the same image. It was a picture of two men on a green metal bench, shoulders touching, sharing a moment that wasn't meant for cameras. The title they all used was dramatic, the kind of phrase designed to make people click. Keanu Reeves sat alone in the rain. What happened next broke the internet. It was a strange title because, as everyone who watched the video knew, there was no actual rain. The ground was dry. The sky was cloudy. Sure, but not a single drop of water had fallen. Yet, millions of people understood the metaphor immediately. They saw the rain in the slump of Keanu's back. They saw the storm in his eyes. The internet didn't break because of scandal. It broke because the video washed away the shiny, fake surface of the world and showed the raw, beating heart underneath. In a small apartment across town, the young woman who had filmed the video woke up to a phone that wouldn't stop buzzing. She had thousands of notifications. Her inbox was flooded. Usually, when something goes viral, the comment section is a dumpster fire of mean jokes and arguments. People pick apart the person's clothes or their weight or their expression. But as she scrolled through the comments on her video, she began to cry. There were no mean jokes, "I've been feeling so lonely lately," read one comment from a user in another country. "Seeing this made me feel like it's okay to sit on the bench and just be sad for a while." "I just lost my job," wrote another person. "This video reminded me that kindness still exists. I'm going to go buy a sandwich for someone today." "That old man is a hero," a third comment said. "And Keanu, he's just one of us. He really is." The video had done the impossible. It had stopped the internet from spinning for a few seconds and forced everyone to look at each other like human beings. It wasn't about the actor anymore. It was about the connection. It was about the apple. It was about the fact that we are all just walking through the gray days, hoping someone will sit next to us. Meanwhile, Keanu was in his kitchen. He was standing by the counter, holding a mug of coffee. He usually avoided the internet in the mornings. He knew that looking at his phone was a sure way to ruin a peaceful day. But today, his publicist had called him early. "You need to see this," she had said, her voice sounding different than usual, softer, almost awed. He picked up his tablet and tapped the screen. He watched the video. He watched himself sitting there, looking defeated. He watched the old man approach. He saw his own face change as the man offered the sandwich. He watched himself take a bite of that simple food. Seeing it from the outside was strange. He looked so small, so vulnerable. For a second, he felt a flash of embarrassment. He was a movie star. He was supposed to be strong, invincible John Wick. But then he looked closer. He saw the way he leaned in to listen to the old man. He saw the genuine smile. He realized that he didn't look weak. He looked real. He read the caption the young woman had written. Just kindness. No filters. He put the tablet down on the counter and took a sip of his coffee. The world was going crazy over this. Reporters were probably camping outside his building right now. They would want to know who the old man was. They would want to find him, interview him, put him on TV. They wanted to turn this moment into a story with a beginning, a middle, and a happy ending where everyone get a check and a round of applause. But Keanu knew that was a wrong thing to do. The magic of that hour on the bench was that it was anonymous. It was a secret between the sky, the pavement, and two strangers. If the cameras swarmed the old man, if they shoved microphones in his face and asked him what it felt like to feed a celebrity, it would destroy the gift he had given. It would turn a moment of grace into a circus. Keanu made a decision. He wasn't going to give a statement. He wasn't going to go on TV to talk about mental health awareness or homelessness. He wasn't going to use this as a PR opportunity. He was just going to let it be. The video was out there, doing its work. That was enough. But he needed to go back. He needed to see that bench again. He pulled on a hoodie and a pair of jeans, covering his face with a hood. He grabbed a thick, warm blanket from his closet, the kind made of wool that soldiers use. He also packed a bag with some fresh apples, sandwiches, and a few bottles of water. He slipped out the back door of his building, avoiding the cameras at the front, and walked toward the park. The park was quiet. It was a weekday, and the cold wind kept most people away. The gravel crunched under his boots as he walked down the path. The trees were bare, their branches scratching the gray sky. He felt a nervous energy in his chest. He didn't know what he expected to find. Maybe the bench would be empty. Maybe someone else would be sitting there. As he got closer, he saw it, the green metal bench. It looked exactly the same, sitting there in the cold air. It was empty. There was no sign of the old man. The wind blew a dry leaf across the spot where they had sat. Keanu walked up to the bench and stood there for a moment. He felt a pang of disappointment, but also a sense of relief. The man was gone, off to wherever he went. Maybe he was in a warm hotel room, using the money Keanu had given him. Maybe he was at a library. Maybe he was just walking, enjoying the freedom of the day. Keanu sat down. He was alone again. But this time, the loneliness felt different. It didn't feel like a heavy weight. It felt like a quiet choice. He placed the wool blanket on the bench beside him. He tucked the bag of food under the bench, where it wouldn't get wet at the sky, finally decided to open up. He didn't leave a note. He didn't sign his name. If the old man came back, or if someone else who needed it found the blanket, that was fine. It wasn't about getting credit. It was just about passing the warmth along. He sat there for 10 minutes, just breathing. He watched a squirrel run up the trunk of an oak tree. He watched the plane fly overhead, leaving a white line across the gray clouds. He thought about the rain in the headlines. He realized now that everyone sits in the rain at some point. Everyone has days where the clouds are too low and the air is too thick to breathe. The difference is you don't have to drown. He stood up and shoved his hands in his pockets. He felt the cold air on his face, but he didn't mind it. He felt alive. He felt connected to the millions of people who had watched the video and felt a little less alone because of it. He felt connected to the old man, wherever he was. As he turned to leave the park, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it. It didn't matter what the headlines said. It didn't matter if the internet was broken. The real story wasn't on a screen. The real story was a taste of a bruised apple. The real story was the warmth of a stranger sitting shoulder to shoulder with you. The real story was that even when the sky is gray and heavy, there's always enough kindness to keep you dry. He walked out of the park gates and merged back into the flow of the city. The wind was still blowing and the air was still cold, but the storm inside him had finally passed. The rain had stopped, not because the weather changed, but because he had learned that even in the heaviest downpour, you can share an umbrella, or a sandwich, or just a moment of time. And that, he knew, was the only thing that truly matters in this strange, hard, beautiful world. He kept walking, his head up, his eyes open, ready for whatever the day might bring.